I'm Sarah Kaplan, Associate Professor of English, and I'm honored to welcome you to Del Mar College today in our fiction reading with Ryan Habermeyer. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Cultural Programs Committee and the Del Mar College Library for their very generous help and support with today's reading. Ryan returns to us today as a friend and a colleague and the author of his award-winning collection of short stories, The Science of Lost Features. I met Ryan 15 years ago here today at Del Mar, and we would spend our afternoons laughing and sometimes plotting in his office and my office. We talked about writing and how words and sounds work to make meaning. We talked about writers we like and we don't like, and the joy and the danger in words. Ryan was always writing a story, revising syntax. I think he inspires. For his latest collection, he received the BOA Short Fiction Prize. His accolades include publications in numerous journals and anthologies, such as the Cincinnati Review, Bellingham Literary Review, Beloit Fiction Journal, Fugue, Bat City Review, Copper Nickel, and Iron Horse Literary Review. I find he draws us in through his cunning figuration and syntax that refines and shapes how we use words to define ourselves and experiences. For example, in his short story, St. Albert Zoo for Endangered Species, he captures the emotional accuracy of our uncertainties. The narrator in the story says, "Yet the fall was too brief to even startle her, only enough to help her feel what it was like to be close to the edge of elsewhere." In Ryan's collection of stories, the wise and jocular tone sings prophetically for literature's necessity. The narrator in Indulgences calls upon us to wait for the next unexpected sigh, to remain subject to the irresistible charms of displaced indulgence. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ryan Habermeyer.
That's a far nicer introduction than I probably deserved, and fluffs up in very eloquent manner the stuff that's in my book. So thank you, Sarah, so much. It's so great to be back. I taught here, as I was chatting with Alan and a couple other people, I taught here from 2007 to 2011. So coming here in a lot of ways is like coming back home, being able to see old friends and colleagues and to see the area and to see how it's changed. So it's been a wonderful visit and a wonderful opportunity to come back and talk with students and to sort of reconnect with Corpus Christi and with Del Mar. I really appreciate what Sarah was saying about, and I'm not surprised when Sarah was talking about my attention to language with stories. In a lot of ways, I'm an odd fiction writer because to me, the words that we use to tell stories are just as important as the content and the narrative itself. I don't really see a distinguishing feature between the poetry of a story and the narrative of a story. So those two things have to go hand in hand with me. So as I'm writing, I'm always thinking about what's the best form or the best way to convey this particular story. It's not just about spitting out a story, it's about the words themselves that enrich and enliven the story also. So I'm going to read two short pieces from the book, and then time given, I'm going to also read something I've been writing recently to share also. So the first one I'll read here is Everything You Wanted to Know About Astrophysics But Were Too Afraid to Ask. And in talking about form, the story is written in a kind of odd way. It's written as like a lecture. It pretends to be a lecture even while it's also a fictional narrative. And I wrote this story after, I believe it was my wife who said, you never write, my wife's always making fun of me because I never write anything normal, everything's weird and bizarre and disturbing, and I think sometimes she questions why she actually married me. But we've almost been married 20 years now, so I must be doing something right. But she asked, she's like, you haven't written like a kind of traditional, boy meets girl, girl meets boy narrative, that kind of love story. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point of view. So this story right here is what came out of that, was this idea of how do I write literally the oldest story in the book, which is a love story, a boy meets girl story. So like I said, the form of it is presented as a lecture from this narrator. So that's kind of a prefatory note to it, so I'll go ahead and get started. Distinguished guests and esteemed members of the Society, I thank you for the opportunity to deliver the keynote address at this, the 226th meeting of the American Astronomical Society. Many thanks to Michio Kaku for that flattering introduction. As you may or may not notice, I am not Stephen Hawking. My name is Oliver Oberman. Dr. Hawking has asked me to speak on his behalf tonight regarding the minor issue of black hole radiation and Bose-Einstein condensates, with which I have a little personal experience. But forgive me if I defer all discussion of the mathematics to the end, as I am not very good with numbers. I promise to keep my remarks to a minimum, as Neil deGrasse Tyson has informed me that the conference auditorium must be cleared in 30 minutes for the annual meeting of the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention. I first became aware of the existence of black holes during a speed dating event last year. I don't need to explain to the members of this society the particulars of such an event. It was during speed date round 14 that I met Moira. After our third date, Moira assured me that she was not contagious. She was ill, though, but there was no reason to be alarmed. She could laugh, cry, kiss, pee, and carry on with her life for now, but the prognosis was bleak. I ran through a list of possible diseases in my head. Flu, typhoid, hepatitis, malaria, leprosy, what? Did she have the plague? I must admit that I was a little aroused and a bit nervous. Most of the women I date are boring. They have nice teeth and love their mothers, but they don't have Moira's wry sense of humor. For an ill person, she looked fantastic. This is awkward, she said. I've never told anyone what's wrong with me. Go ahead, you can tell me anything, I said, which was an obvious lie because it had only been 2 dates and I wasn't ready for anything. Moira confessed that she was collapsing, not from adrenal fatigue or cancerous growths. This wasn't fatigue, and this wasn't some psychobabble about the disenfranchisement of women within the laboring classes, she insisted. She was collapsing into herself. It's subatomic, Moira said. Gravity is pressing in and thermodynamics is pressing out. You mean like science? I wondered. I told her I worked demolition on a night crew. Moira said that according to her best calculations, the struggle in her body between gravity pulling in and radiation pushing out would shortly end as all her matter collapsed into a concentrated point no bigger than a fleck of dust. It was possible that there would be a supernova, but then total blackness. That was her official diagnosis. Collapsaris humanitatis singularitas. I'm becoming a black hole, Moira said. You might find it hard to believe, but it is the first clinical observation of its kind. Later, when we were in bed together, Moira showed me where the black hole had started to form. It was on her shoulder. It looked like a freckle. That's it? That's it, she said. What can I say, my fellow scientists? Black holes are incredibly disappointing. She said she had an itch one morning, an itch that didn't go away. Then it felt like a lump. She went to the doctor. Her mother had died of cancer, but this wasn't cancer, the doctor said. He didn't know what it was. After reviewing the lab work, he told her to consult with a physicist. Her insurance didn't cover the university hospital, so she ended up at a community college. The physicist was a little annoyed. Then Moira started taking off her shirt and said she was going to show him something he had never seen before, and that got his attention and he was a little less grumpy. Another round of tests showed that around the freckle was a high concentration of nitrogen and helium and traces of hydrogen cyanide. Star stuff, he called it. What did that mean, Moira wanted to know. The physicist said a black hole was the only logical explanation. Will it hurt? She asked. Theoretically? No, the physicist said. You might feel some tearing as space and time stretch. We call it spaghettification. I like spaghetti, Moira said. The physicist shook his head and said science is wasted on all the wrong people. I wasn't sure if I believed Moira's story. She was a nice girl, but a black hole? I had dated crazy before, but nothing like this. Still, it was a fantasy that I could not resist. It's no big deal, Moira told me the next morning as she got on her clothes. Sooner or later, we're all eclipsed, right? C'est la vie. I wasn't sure that this was the time to start thinking like the French. While Moira worked at the bakery, I wrote a letter to Stephen Hawking. Dear Mr. Hawking, I know you're terribly busy, but I have a question. It's a matter of life and death. Is there any way to coexist with the Thank you. Yours in scientific solidarity, Oliver Oderman. I'm happy to report to this society that we tried to forget science and make our romance work. Moira and I were inseparable. Our relationship was all light and no shadow. We took walks around town, we kissed in the rain. When I came home from the construction site, she was waiting for me, and when she came home for the bakery, I was waiting for her. But the seriousness of her condition manifested almost immediately. Nobody else noticed, but I did. It was the little things. Her back hunched, her knees buckled. She complained of heart palpitations and muscle spasms. Customers didn't come to the bakery interested in coffee and orange rolls. No, she was a bottomless pit for all of their venting, for all of their secrets. I told her I could be her anchor, tethering her to the atomic scaffolding of our lives. Now, I won't bore you with the math of how black holes consume dust at a gas rate conforming to Velikov's electrothermal instability theorem, but understand that Moira was no different. She knew that her time was limited, and she was trying to soak up the world before it slipped away, before it collapsed in on her. She said there was too much, though. Too many books to read, too much food to taste, too much virtuality to process, too many indigenous tribes not yet discovered, too many cats to save from alleys. It made her head hurt, like she was 5 and she ate too much ice cream. They had it right all those years ago, she said. The world is too much with us. There is too much to know and not enough time. Despite what the doctors and physicists told her about her painless termination, Moira was worried. She had always wanted to be a mother, but not like this. Black holes swallow galaxies. What if I swallow the world? Think about it, she told me as she paced the room. What if this is the end of poverty, chocolate, public libraries, the electoral college, long walks on the beach? What if we lose it all, Oliver? How can I live with myself if I give birth to all of that loss? Then she punched the wall, and it left a hole the size of her fist. That won't happen, I lied. I won't let it happen. But what can you do, Oliver? What can any of us actually do? Now, I know that we are men of science gathered here, so I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I dabbled in the humanities to comfort Moira. We hugged, and I told her that there was still time. I told her we could get married, and maybe love is a transformative physics that operates outside the laws of quantum mechanics. No, it's useless, Moira said. This is all we are now, you stretching one way and me another. That, my fellow scientists, is romance. Sooner or later, we'll all be alone, stretched too thin and staring at what used to be the edge of our lives. We just need a physicist to do the math to prove it. That night, we fell asleep together, and the next day, Moira was gone. It didn't take long to find what was left of her. I took one look at the hole on the wall, and I knew it was her. Her collapsing was complete. Somehow she had not burst into a supernova and swallowed all the pain and love and happy birthdays and goodbyes as she had feared. This was the way her world ended, stretched too thin to be anything else but a hole. I got very close to the hole without being too close. I had read all about the event horizon of black holes, and I knew my limits. I loved Moira, but I wasn't ready to be part of her. The hole emitted no odor, no synchrotron. I don't even actually know what that word is. No synchrotron radiation. See, sometimes you write, you have no idea what you're writing. So, no synchrotron radiation, no nitrogen, no Schrodinger's cat, so somebody tell Polyakov to rescind his paper. It looked very familiar to the freckle Moira had on her shoulder. Moira, I whispered, Moira, can you hear me? Can you understand me? Will you give me a sign that this is you? There was an echo trapped inside, almost like a hiccup. I couldn't tell what the echo was saying. It sounded like Moira, but I wasn't sure. The more I listened, wanting to believe it was her, the more I felt my insides tearing in two directions, hollowing me out like a bowl. I thought about running out the door and never coming back. Maybe Moira was right. Maybe it was useless. And then I saw the postcard on the countertop. It was from Stephen Hawking. The picture on the postcard was of the Milky Way. The candy bar, not the galaxy, because if you don't already know, Stephen is a real ass. On the back of the postcard, scribbled in lousy penmanship, was the answer to my question. Dear Oliver, it is theoretically possible, but so is everything. Best of luck, Stephen. I decided not to leave. What good would that have done? Sure, you can run away from women, even love, but never science. I made dinner for the black hole that night, spaghetti with meatballs. I tied the meatballs to long strings of pasta and tried to throw them inside the hole from the other side of the room, like fishing. I tried to pretend that we were together again, but the future seemed out of reach. There was only the past and the present being stretched in too many directions. Part of me knew she was not coming back. Part of me knew that I had to let her go. We had passed the event horizon of our relationship. It was only a matter of time before I would forget, but still, I couldn't leave her. I stayed with the whole day and night. I kept it company. I fooled myself into thinking I could make this relationship work. And yes, for those of you already thinking it, there are things you can do with the black hole that you can't do with a regular woman, but this is hardly the place to discuss such affairs of the heart. In the beginning, the black hole was timid in my presence. She shrunk down to the size of a coin, trying to disappear from my sight. Over time, she became comfortable with my presence. She was a marvel, expanding and contracting on a whim, inviting me and refusing me, but always seducing me. She was all echo and void, a bottomless pit who seemed indifferent to me. And she was nothing inside. She had no center, no core, but it was always an attractive emptiness, always out of reach, always at the point of something. In a way that I'm ashamed to admit, I loved Moira more this way, as an absence rather than a presence. Other times it was just a hole on a crumbling wall. Eventually we drifted apart. We were in different spaces now, emotionally more than physically. I had tried to take the relationship to the next level, summoning the courage to walk past the event horizon and crawl inside the hole. My fellow scientists, it was very strange. I did not feel myself stretched like spaghetti. I did not feel time stand still on the head of a pin. I could only feel emptiness as it slowly evaporated back into the universe. When I regained my senses, I was lying on the floor. I stared at the hole as it continued collapsing until it became just another invisible crack on the wall. When I'm not lecturing astrophysicists on all the things they misunderstand about the universe, sometimes I still work the Demolition Crew. I like to level buildings. I like to dig foundation pits. Sometimes I just grab a sledgehammer for no reason at all and just start swinging. When I see a crack on the sidewalk, I'll wedge a few fingers inside so it doesn't have to feel so lonely. If I see a rabbit hole, I get close to it, wondering if I'll feel Moira's presence. It is all so fragile, but nothing I do, nothing any one of us does makes any real difference. Science will keep being science. Whether it's a pothole in the street or the ozone in the sky, we keep making holes because we want to reach inside them, grasping for lost horizons in the constant search for the other end of nothing. That's a cheery ending. The second one I'm going to read a few years ago I started getting, I don't know the right word to say it, it's not quite bored, but I think as writer, anytime you're writing anything, you do something, one thing for a long time, and you keep doing it because it works, especially if you're having success with it and you're publishing things and you feel like it's working, you keep trying to do that, you keep trying to replicate that for a while, but eventually you get bored with that and you want to try new things and you want to experiment with something different. And one of the things that I had resisted doing for a long time was writing about myself personally and doing more nonfiction-based work. And I don't know quite why I resisted that. I was much more interested in creating fictional worlds and fantastical, bizarre, weird things. But then slowly I've started writing more nonfiction-based material. But anytime I try to do that, I feel that nonfiction is insufficient and I need to fictionalize things. So I started doing a blend of things that are fictional and things that are non-fictional. So this piece here is like this kind of hybrid form of things that there is some factual basis for them, but there's also things that are made up. And this piece is very, very short, and it's where the title of the collection comes from. This piece is called A Genealogical Approach to My Father's Ass. Olaf Haber, respected oak farmer, ate raw human buttocks in the closing days of the Third Silesian War. He never fired his weapon in combat. He never saw the ocean. He never met his son. It is written that he was an accomplished kisser. His grandson, Heinrich Haber, suffered a case of debilitating hemorrhoids in his 22nd year. Unable to sleep in his condition one night, he wandered the streets of Ansbach, Germany, where he shortly found himself in a tree, angling his bare bottom to the moon, as instructed in one of Goethe's poems, convinced that the moonlight would alleviate his discomfort. He was shot in the left buttock by the town burgomaster, on whose property Heinrich was trespassing. This relieved the pain of his hemorrhoids, but not of the heart, as the musket ball was removed with the help of the Burgermeister's daughter, who fell madly in love with young Heinrich. In Ansbach, it is now a local tradition, even today, that when the Burgermeister's daughter gets engaged, her fiancé must be shot in the ass. Their grandson, Karl Wilhelm Habermeyer, became a Lutheran minister in America. Those of his congregation could attest that when the Reverend Habermeyer spoke with the power of the Holy Spirit, you felt it tingling in your sphincter. Karl Wilhelm attributed his gift to the physical abuse he endured as a young man when his father would swat his backside with the family Bible. My grandfather, John Gilbert Habermeyer, designed the gluteal cushions for astronauts on the Apollo 8 mission. It was his heart, not his ass, which gave out in the end. Yesterday, I felt my father's ass. I was helping him use the toilet. He no longer remembered how. The neurons in his head, weary from genealogy, had fizzled into a gray haze. He wrapped his arms around my neck like a baby baboon while I wiped. It didn't feel the way that I imagined. It didn't feel like the ass that held up the belt he slammed against the bathroom door after I called him Jabba the Hutt, or the ass that produced blue darts around the Boy Scout campfires, or even the ass that fidgeted nervously on the hospital chair as he held me the night my asthma wouldn't let me breathe. It felt cold and limp and alien, heavy with the science of lost futures. And that's a really short piece too, in part because it's really hard to sustain a longer piece of work when you're writing about your family history of asses. Like, that's just really difficult to try to pull off, so it's much more condensed for that reason. I'm going to read a piece that I'm going to read a piece that I've been working on, actually just finished and recently published, which I don't really know if I have much prefatory thing to say, so I think I'll just launch right into it. This one is called The Algorithms of Happiness. The woman they call the Leech moves through the rooms unnoticed, removing dirty vials from machines and placing them gently in her biohazard cart. She wants nothing more than to take these into the decontamination room and sterilize them, but she knows her protocols. She knows there must be order in all things. She removes the plastic tubes and hoses. She removes the aluminum sheets and 50 other metallic parts whose names she learned but has since forgotten. She disassembles the gears and arranges them carefully on the floor for inspection, and then slowly she begins to clean. Scrub, flush, wipe, scour, rinse, mop, dust, disinfect. There are so many words for cleaning, but only a single word for dreaming, and this bothers the Leech. There should be more words. Why isn't there a job to name the unnameable things? But she knows that this is a dangerous question, because to name it is to feel, and she has no time to dwell on such misfortunes. She stands, the room is white and sterile. She arranges disinfectants in her cart. She catches a reflection of herself in the window, but moves quickly out the door. There are a dozen other machines to clean tonight, and so many fluids to dispose. The Leech is not aware of who discovered the process. Maybe it was invented, not discovered, but the Leech is not sure of the difference. It happened long before she was born, back when they still called this place Utah. At first, the scientists believed that they had discovered the soul, but only later did they realize that the fluids extracted from the brain using the machine were actually emotions. A fifth state of matter, the scientists declared. So after blackening the skies, after the pesticides and the plastics, the chemtrails and the melted ice caps, they went public with the discovery and announced the first desiporium, an emporium of desires, of feelings, the mayor announced, where people could have whatever emotions they wanted. Happiness in 3 drops, the newspapers declared. Who could resist? Who would imagine such a process, the Leech wonders as she cleans. It doesn't matter. What matters, the Leech tells herself, is that the process is remarkable even as she is unremarkable. In the next room, she disassembles another machine and sterilizes it. She soaks up spilled emotions with the mop. It's a shame, the Leech thinks, that a woman is not a machine that can be taken apart and put back together again. The Leech did not choose her nickname. She's a janitor technically, but she prefers the word Leech. She does not protest the indignity of names. Hers is a noble profession. Little things are consequential too, and she remembers hearing that in training. She wears a dark gray jumpsuit. Her hair is always pinned up in a bun, and whenever she walks through the hallway, others step out of her way, pressing their backs to the wall, afraid to touch her. She did not always think about becoming a janitor. As a girl, the only thing she enjoyed was holding her breath underwater, her father counting the seconds until one day he was no longer there to count. Even now, she will run a hot bath after a shift and practice holding her breath, practice being gelatinous like a jellyfish, wondering if she concentrates enough, could she bioilluminate and float away into the sky? The chief designer who interviewed her for the position at the facility, the desiporium that they call, asked only a single question: what is your favorite emotion? She could tell that this was a man who had never sunk to the bottom of a lake, who had never screamed into the dark contours of water or listened for the music of stars. If we're being honest, the Leech said, I feel very little. The donors at the desiporium are pleasant but messy. Kneeling, the Leech scrubs the floors of footprints, dirt, flakes of skin, crusts, jellies, and whatever liquefied emotions have been left behind by the process. The Leech likes the look of cleanliness just as she likes the look of sickness, each one reaching for the other but never touching, like rings on a tree stump. Under a gurney, she discovers 2 pale amber drops, like juice from an apricot. Sometimes when cleaning, she pauses, wondering to whom these drops belonged, trying to picture the face of the donor. This is too dangerous, because to imagine is to feel. She wipes up the drops with a sponge, careful not to let it touch her skin. Once she was not careful and accidentally wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, not knowing that there was a drop of turquoise. She spent the rest of the night feeling incredibly shy, so painfully shy that she locked herself in the closet. Her supervisor sent her home and suspended her for a week without pay. Luckily, she and her mother had saved a few cans of food under the floorboard in case of an emergency. On the counter is a drop of guilt. Every emotion has its own color. Pomegranates, azures, golds, and greens, indexed and coded. She had to memorize a color chart in training. Surprise is purple, disgust is yellow, shame comes in various hues of orange depending on the potency. Once extracted from the donors, emotions in the liquid state are seldom pure, always an intense swirl, uneasily separated by another machine upstairs which the Leech is not allowed to see or clean. Each emotion is given to a technician for distillation. The Leech doesn't know how to distill emotions. She only knows how to sterilize and dispose them, but she is learning. From her pocket, the Leech unfolds a string of paper dolls like an accordion. Each is a slightly different color, like a sad rainbow. Sometimes she likes to pretend that this is her family. Sometimes lying in bed, she will stare at these dolls for hours. She knows that she could dissolve the paper dolls in water and take a cocktail of emotion, slipping off into an endless dream. But the Leech has watched enough television programs about animals surviving in the wild, about mothers who eat their young, because of mercy, the voice on the program says. And so the Leech only looks at the dolls, saving them. After looking over her shoulder, the Leech dabs the doll into the drop. The paper turns pale burgundy. Folding the dolls and wrapping them in plastic, she returns them to her pocket. The Leech goes into the next room and polishes the machine until it shines. Before becoming the Leech, she had never considered the body as a house of many fluids. It always seemed to her like a piece of paper waiting to be folded then torn, but never a place of dwelling or permanence. She cleans the windows, her hands moving in circles, leaving behind no streaks. Below, there are rows of black rooftops like teeth crowded inside a mouth. Without needing to squint, she can see dozens of other desiporiums scattered across the city, their identical chimneys leaking yellow vapor. In every one, a Leech just like her is cleaning up the mess of the day's spilled emotions. She's lost track of how many years she's been leeching. Since her mother got sick, it used to be so exhilarating, this cleaning. The aromas, the noise, the mess, so many people, such emotion, such wonder. The world was new again, and she liked cleaning up leftover drops of surprise. It left joyful streaks on the floor. She liked boredom and stained. She was indifferent to hope, a frequent donation. Now she is tired of all this feeling. Isn't it better to think than to feel? During her break, she sips coffee and thinks these enormous nothings of thought. The Leech pauses the cleaning cart outside one of the donation rooms. She is not supposed to watch the process, but she cannot help but watch. The technicians wear heavy leather aprons and safety goggles. That they might have joy is a sign on every wall. Even with the safety equipment, the process turns the technician's hair slightly luminescent, as if they've been dipped in moonlight. Donors sit inside the machines, blindfolded, legs secured in stirrups, suction cups applied all over their heads. Soft music plays. The technician counts backwards, signaling the donor to bring into focus whatever memory is the vessel for donation. If they are donating rage, they must conjure up a memory full of rage. Sadness requires sad thoughts, and so on. The fresher the memory, the more potent the extracted emotion, and the more money the donor will be paid. When it's over, the emotion is distilled into a glass vial, but the memory is lost. The technician uses a foot pedal to adjust the extraction pressure in the suction cups. The machine gurgles, there is steam and hissing, and then slowly the fluid drips out into the vials. It looks rather painless. This donor leaves 3 drops of blue on the floor. The Leech saves these with her paper dolls. She has never donated her emotions. She imagines if she did, it would be a sea of blue. There are a million shades of melancholy, but twice as many shades of pain, each of them named and numbered because people are not satisfied with their own pain. They want to exchange it for the pain of others, perhaps believing that it is more manageable, or perhaps because there is such pleasure in someone else's misery. The Leech knows misery. Her father was a dentist. As a girl, she used to clean the tools in his office, scalers, bristles, forceps, keys. He taught her how to use them. He showed her anatomy books with pictures with teeth and pharyngeal arches and tongues. He taught her all about pain. Did you know that there are 2 billion nerve endings in the human mouth? This, he said, tracing the metallic hook along her gums, is a 1. This, he said, piercing the tip of her uvula, is 5. And this, he said, clenching one of her molars with the pliers and beginning to pull, is a 9. There is so much pain, the Leech came to understand, but there is also not enough pain. The Leech knows that she should leave and go home. She clocked out an hour ago, and her mother is waiting, no doubt, dizzied from watching 14 hours of televised dog racing, waiting for her to put the 3 drops under her tongue. But the Leech loves peeking into the lobby. There are 2 entries to every desitorium, one facing the street for customers, one in the alley for donors. In the lobby is where the vials of emotion are shelved floor to ceiling. The glass bottles catch the light and spread against the walls in an eerie phosphorescence, like being inside a kaleidoscope. Wouldn't it be nice to go through the door facing the street, to walk up to the counter and request whatever emotion you wanted? 6 drops now, maybe 4 drops later. Wouldn't it be nice to have the luxury of perfectly measured feeling? The scientists warn against consuming too much emotion, saying the brain can't process it, saying that it can be fatal, but still, it would be nice to feel perfectly, the Leech thinks, and it would be nice to be free from the burden of feeling. Leave, she tells herself, leave, but she loves the look of the strange light in the lobby. She loves the quiet hum of the machines. She loves the feel of clean things under her feet, and she stays for the pleasure of it. And then she sees him. A man, no, a boy really, with a face full of wrinkles pacing outside the revolving door. He wears a blue threadbare suit, no tie, frayed collar, not even 20, the Leech thinks, his skin already pale. It's rare for donors to visit at this hour. There are no appointments, only walk-ins. The Leech knows that the ones who come at this hour are desperate, if they know that they are here at all. The Leech used to pity these donors. Now she guards her emotions, caging them in tiny knots within her chest. The world is sick, she thinks. Feeling is harder than it used to be. She knows that if she feels, she would be tempted to donate, and once you begin donating, you never stop. The man shuffles into the lobby. It's his 3rd time tonight. The law says that you can only donate twice a week, but there are loopholes. Donors in this hour of night all look the same, like scarecrows in January. Once hooked into the machines, they become floppers, floaters, spitters, singers, shakers, moaners, biters, screamers, tremblers, and laughers. It's not easy to extract someone's feelings. They leave a real mess on the floor. But without a nest, then there is no Leech, and if there is no leeching, then she is not, and if she is not, then how can she think these incredible nothings of thought? The Leech hurries across the lobby floor and takes the man by the arm. She has no idea why she acts this way. There's room for one more, the Leech says quietly. Behind the curtain, she helps the man into the machine, strapping him into the stirrups and tightening the suctions around his head. She blindfolds him. Hold still, the Leech says. Think about your memory. When will it begin, the dazed man whispers. Soon, the Leech says. Try to relax. The machine begins to hum and the man trembles. The Leech wonders what is going on inside his mind. The Leech wants to believe that he is thinking about his mother. Maybe his mother never hugged him too, just shook his hand at bedtime. Maybe he too found embraces in other things, like climbing trees or lying on train tracks or crawling inside the abandoned boiler on a summer day and feeling the sweat pool on his skin. The man's mouth is open, but there are no words coming out. It's shocking, the Leech thinks, how you can erase someone and not even know it. A soft, not quite pink liquid trickles into the glass vial. The Leech knows all the colors of the emotion spectrum, but has never seen a color quite like this. It almost pains her to look at it. The Leech wonders what it would be like to put 2, maybe even 11 drops under her own mother's tongue. Nobody would ever know. But what emotion could this pink be? The sudden feeling of your own smallness? The sadness of knowing you were born in the wrong place in the wrong time? The frustration of realizing that in your brief life you will live a fraction of human experience? It could be anything. The fear and joy of walking on the rings of Saturn, the longing not for the past or the future but an alternative present, the longing for somewhere else. Or maybe the heartache for a sideways world whose algorithms are yours but also not yours. Outside, the roads are dusty and empty, and the Leech wonders what animal might be dreaming her. It would be nice if it was something small, she thinks, like a rabbit, something quiet and forgettable, something ghosted but not yet invisible. Is it over? The man mumbles. Soft pink tears trickle down his cheeks. The Leech soaks these up with the paper dolls. Not yet, the Leech says. Focus, just a little bit more. She grips the man's hand in her own. Breathe, the Leech says. And then she presses the foot pedal, gentle at first and then almost grinding it to the floor. The machine hums, the suction cups hiss, the man trembles. It will be such a mess, the Leech smiles. The man's mouth opens, small gasps leave his lips. 1, 2, 3, and together they bring the drops into this world of clean, sick things. Thank you.
We were introduced to your work from our English professor, and she gave us the assignment of reading the good Nazi Carl Schmitt. And I found it incredibly complex, and for every answer to a question that I found, it seemed a few lines later that three more questions would pop up, and my answer was completely wrong. I was just wondering, how long does it take you to write something like that, and what's the process like?
That's a good question. I was talking in Sarah's class yesterday about my writing process. I'm a very, very slow writer, probably slower than any of my writer friends. I take months to do a single piece, and I mean, there are still things that I have that I probably wrote 3 years ago that I just shove away. I'm just not in a rush to publish or in a rush to even write. I take it very slow. I think with that story in particular, that story went through like multiple drafts, and even after I publish something, I'm not content to just say like that's the final version. There's a really great American writer, Kurt Vonnegut. You may have heard of him. He wrote a great book, Slaughterhouse-Five, Mother Night, wrote a ton of excellent books. He always said that when he sent his stories out to journals, to literary journals, places for publication, he thought of them as seeds. You know, he never knew like where he planted one, if it would grow into anything. And so stuff that he published, he would go back and then revise even after he had published it. And I do something very similar. You know, it doesn't matter to me if it's been published. To me, it's still not finished until I get it right. So that story took me at least, I would say, at least 6 months to write. Pretty much everything takes me at least 6 months, and then it probably sat for a few more months, and then I'll send it out, and then I'll wait, and then if it gets picked up by a journal, I'll go and revisit it again after I see it in print, then I start cringing and regretting everything about it. That one was also really difficult because of the subject matter. I think anytime you write about Nazis, you're wading into difficult territory, especially with one. So if you haven't read that story, it's a story about a family that basically adopts a pet Nazi, like this guy who thinks he was a Nazi or wants to be punished for being a Nazi, and the family adopts him like as a pet, basically. So that was like really, really tricky to write that in a way that wasn't going to piss off too many people. Although I really don't care if I piss off people either. You know, like, if you get pissed off, then okay. But I don't know. I feel like I haven't even answered your question.
No, you did.
Okay. Sorry, I ramble. So.
The one that you just read about the bud, is that more personal, or is everything fictional that you write? And also, use a lot of medical terms that you do like a medical class.
So I'll take the first question. The first part of that question I'll answer next. I said this yesterday to Sarah's class, when I was an undergraduate, I was a microbiology major for 3 years until I converted to the dark side of the humanities and literature. And really my rationale for that was, like, I graduated as an undergrad with like more than 200 credits because like I kept on taking classes and nobody told me to stop taking classes. Like I just kept on taking them because I literally wanted to swallow the world. Like I wanted to know everything. Part of the reason why I became a professor is because I can still learn. Like I just love soaking up information, and I love science. Like everything I read here has like a scientific bent to it in one way or form. But I know just enough about science to be dangerously stupid, is what I tell people. You know, so like I don't pretend to know about quantum mechanics or black holes. Like, you know, I'll look stuff up and I'll spend hours researching and reading, and then I'll be like, just for like 2 or 3 lines in a story. You know, so yeah, I love putting in scientific terms. I love writing stories that have science that kind of feels like science fiction, but not quite science fiction at the same time. Like it hovers between. It's not hard science fiction. It's not like Star Trek. Which is, if you like Star Trek, that's great. So yeah, almost everything I write has some sort of either biology and physics are the 2 subjects that I like to read a lot on, because I just think there's really fascinating discoveries that are happening constantly in those fields. And the second part of that question, everyone always asks that. Anytime I read that story about my father's ass, everyone wants to know like how much is fiction and how much is true. And I'm going to give you the most disappointing answer that I always give, which is I don't say, because I feel like that ruins it. I feel like if I were to tell you everything that's true in that story, it's like you can close it off and you can compartmentalize it and you can forget it and you can say, oh, okay, I know this is true and I know this is fake, so I don't have to worry about that sort of thing. And I've had lots of very annoyed, frustrated people come up like after a reading and be like, no, I have to know, like, what happened to your dad? And, you know, I will say that my grandfather actually did work for NASA. He did work for NASA. He was part of a lot of the rocket launches. He was one of the chief safety inspectors. Whether or not he actually worked on the cushions for what the astronauts sat on, that's as much as I will tell you. Like that's me spinning things out, because I wrote the story. I actually wrote that story shortly after my grandfather died. But the names in that story are all true. My family's done a lot of genealogy, and they can really trace back my family's history in Germany to like the 30 Years' War. Or what was it, the 100 Years' War? I can't remember which one. One of those wars in Germany. I don't know. They go way back. So those are all actually family names. And my family actually is from Ansbach. But anyway, sorry. See, then I start talking and I start telling you like all the true things in there, and I'm ruining it. So that I'll stop right there. So I'm sorry to give you the disappointing answer. So.
Do you get your inspiration for the stories? Do you get them in real life, or is it mostly from your history biology classes?
It's a combination of the 2. So I'm I read voraciously. If you want to be a writer, in addition to writing all the time, like having like your own writing regimen, whatever that is, and Stephen King says this. There's a quote by Stephen King in one of his writing memoirs. He says that if you don't have the time to be a reader, then you don't have the time to be a writer. And I think that that's absolutely true, that you have to read voraciously. So I read through all fields, whether it's science, history, politics, sociology, like I said, I read it all. And I'll find little bits and pieces here and there, and I'll latch on to one thing, and then I'll stick with it, and then I always let it fester in my mind for a while. I never will see something and then immediately go and try to write about it. I'll jot it down. I have a place where I keep notes. I used to handwrite everything, but now I'm old and lazy, so I just keep notes on my phone. I'm a little hesitant to say that. Anyways, I'll say it. Many, many years ago, my wife read some random weird article about how the elephant population in Africa is, the poachers, and they're just killing elephants left and right. And so now one of the things, there was a job advertisement. It was, and I kid you not, this is the title, Elephant Masturbator. That was the name of the title, so that they masturbate these elephants and they extract the semen from these elephants to impregnate and inseminate it. I thought, oh my, that's the most incredible job, I think. What a world we live in where that is a job. You can get a degree and do that. And I probably sat on that information for 2 or 3 years, and I'm like, I know I have to write about it. I don't know what I'm going to say about that, because how do you do that? And I just finished writing that piece. I thought about reading it, but I'm like, I don't know. This is being recorded, so I don't know how many times I want to say, 50 times I want to say elephant masturbation. That's not the kind of thing you come to a place and start saying a whole bunch of times. So yeah, things like that, random things. And what you have to do is you have to take the leap from real world stuff, because as a fiction writer, you're not doing a documentary. You have to take an imaginative leap from what's this real life thing, and how can you carry it over into making a story out of it. And that's tough, and that takes time.
What inspires you to be a writer?
I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here, because she's not here, and she won't watch this anyways. As a kid, I was a fantastic liar. I was really, really good. And I got to a certain age where I realized I could lie to adults and get away with it, and there was a real pleasure in doing that. And somewhere along the line, I can't remember who said it, but now it's my own philosophy. I think if you want to, there are 2 things I tell my students if you want to be a fiction writer that you have to do. Number 1, you have to people watch. You have to pay attention to people, watch what they do, watch what they say, eavesdrop in public conversations, listen to how people talk, so that way you can capture that and use that from real life. And the second thing is you got to be a real good liar. You got to be able to convince me that the lies that you're telling, however fantastical, like this piece, the one that I read, it's a totally fantastical premise that in some world in the future we can extract emotions and you can donate emotions and sell them to other people. That's an absurd premise. I don't know. Maybe it's science fiction today, but maybe 50 years from now that'll be true. I don't know. But you have to be able to lie to your reader to present that and make them feel like it's real. So there's a hefty amount of lying that goes into it. And I always preface that by saying what's good for real life is not necessarily what's good for fiction. We really hope that in the real world people aren't awful liars, but that's a trait that you need to have. So you gotta compartmentalize, right? I lie when I do fiction, but then when I'm out with friends and family and the rest of the world, I have to tell the truth, or most of the time I tell the truth. There are little fledges of lies here and there, which is probably why most politicians would make excellent fiction writers, because they're just liars, and by nature, all of them, large lies, small lies, and everything in between. So, but yeah, and my mom was the one who said, my mom sat me down and was like, look, if you're gonna lie all the time, we need to find an outlet for this. So I started writing stories at a very young age, and that was an outlet for it.
Is that a true story?
Maybe. Maybe, but even if it isn't, here's the funny thing. So like one of the things I really study a lot too outside of literature is neuroscience. There's a thing in neuroscience called memory confabulation, which is your brain is a lying machine, basically, what they've discovered. It's a survival technique that your brain does that, tracing us all the way back to Neanderthals and everything, like our brain just lies to us for survival. So your brain will implant memories into your head, they've discovered, that never actually happened and make you think that it actually happened. So I say yes, that is a real memory, but now I don't even know. After I read that piece of neuroscience, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I made it up, you know? I mean, I'll ask my mom, but you know, my mom might not remember either. So as far as we can tell, that is a true memory. Yeah. Other questions? Sorry, I'm smirking at my daughter down here. I brought my daughter out. My daughter was born here and she hasn't been back, so I brought her here and she's just smirking at me down here. No? Yes?
I don't know. So I'm really curious about this concept of lying. And one thing that I think our class was really struck by was the way these fantastical unrealities are melded with realities in your stories. You know, I think of the zoo story, the endangered species, where the woman just becomes confined as part of the zoo. Like it's just and the characters sort of go with it.
Yeah.
And I like your position that you're saying, you know, if that pisses people off, well, it pisses people off. So I wonder if you could talk about the value and your instinct as a fiction writer in, you know, bending reality in those ways. Why do you think you're drawn to it? And what does a story that bends reality do that a piece of realistic fiction can't do?
That's a wonderfully complex question. No, and it is really great. I started off as a writer writing very realistic things. The first writer I read, like 20 years ago when I first started writing very seriously, when I thought, okay, I had encouragement from teachers and they're like, you know, you should really do this. Like you're pretty good at it. I read like American realism. Like that's really where I started, you know. And the first writer I can really look at and be like, man, that writer blew me away was Raymond Carver. And I still am blown away by Raymond Carver. I love like the simplicity of his prose and the minimalist style that he has. But I was, and that was kind of the predominant style in the late 90s, early 2000s, the American style of writing. But at the same time, I was also reading a lot of Latin American writers and writers from South America, you know, Borges, Cortázar, Marquez, Isabel Allende, you know, and there was that whole movement of magical realism that had started in the 50s and 60s with them, and that had slowly trickled its way into American mainstream writing. So I was being taught this is what American, like, you know, there's always literary trends, right? And no writing occurs in a vacuum. You know, you're influenced by the culture around you, you're influenced by like what's happening in the actual cultural sphere, the social sphere, and then you're also influenced by the people that you're reading. So I was getting the realistic stuff on one hand, and then I was getting also like much more fantastical things, which was like, you know, a lot of, you know, I grew up on fairy tales too, so I was always reading fairy tales. I don't know if I've ever done like a hard sit down, like psychoanalytical session with myself as to why I'm drawn to those things. I've always been fascinated by just staring and looking at like weird, grotesque stuff. Like I was that weird kid, you know? I mean, look at me, I'm wearing a Muppet shirt for heaven's sakes, you know? My ringtone is the Muppets on my phone. So I just like the weird stuff, and it feels, there's an American writer, David Foster Wallace, who says that any writer has to figure out what clicks for your ear. That's the way he talks about it, like what clicks. And it's this very abstract, strange thing. Like he's like, what clicks for one person is going to click for someone else. And I don't know why that clicks for me, but like all the weird things, if like the what ifs that I ask myself, that clicks. Like when I'm writing it, like that's when I hear it in my head. So like, yeah, all the weird, bizarre things are endlessly more fascinating to me than what is perceived by reality. And you know, again, to a large extent, reality itself is just so weird. I mean, I just got through talking about elephant masturbation. Like that is, like, you can't make that up. Like that's actually a thing. So, yeah, truth is stranger than fiction, you know, as they say. But yeah, like you're talking about, the real challenge is having to blur those worlds together. It's much more difficult, I think, to write what is contemporarily called fabulism. It's much more difficult to write that than it is like a very strict realistic piece, because you're asking your reader to go along with a ridiculously absurd premise. And a lot of people you'll lose in the first paragraph or two, and it's like, that's fine. I'm just not the writer for you then, you know? And there are plenty of other writers out there that you can read that do the things that you want them to do. So I just feel like there's way more opportunity to explore human nature and human experience through those things. To give another reference to another writer who I think is wonderful, Flannery O'Connor. You know, she talks, for Flannery O'Connor, everything comes down to the intersections of violence and religion, right? Like that's her whole thing. And she talks about violence as being a conduit for her to explore religion and spirituality. So like what I learned from her is like you gotta have your own artistic obsession. And for me, it's like the weird, grotesque, perverse, bizarre things. That to me is like a conduit for exploring human expression and human nature. For her it was violence and people behaving horribly to one another. For me it's like absurd things and weird things. And every writer, part of becoming a writer is figuring out what your artistic obsessions are. It's one of the things I work with my students all the time. So I'm like, don't write like me, I don't want you to write like me, I want you to write like you and figure out what you're obsessed with. Other questions? Have I frightened everyone? It's a dark, seedy mind in here. Yeah, someone's tentatively raising their hand, like you're not quite sure you want the answer.
Was it difficult for like how abstract and like strange that you said that your writing tends to be for you to first trust somebody with your work, like as an artist showing their, you know, something you're very proud of, but which you also consider strange and not the norm to show it to, you know, to somebody for the first time?
Yeah, it's grueling. It really is. It's so difficult to take like all the time and energy that you put into creating, and it's any work of art. You know, whether you're a musician or a painter or you know whatever you do, showcasing that to someone else and holding it up and saying, you know, go ahead and ridicule it if you want. Like that's not easy. That's nerve-wracking. And I mean, I still get butterflies, like now, you know. And when I was a much younger writer, I didn't think that was going to be the case. I thought, oh, you know, you get over that, but I don't know if you ever do. And I actually think that's a good thing, you know. I think if you are arrogant enough to be like, yeah, like this is a work of genius, you know. I mean, but no, I'm always nervous to showcase new stuff and to send it out and to get rejections. And I still get rejected all the time from journals and places and stuff, you know. And that's very hard, but you have to develop thick skin. You really have to push through that and just keep sending work out and finding where your niche is. But that doesn't mean it doesn't feel better every time. You know, every time I get a rejection, it stings. It really does. But at some point, you know, you compensate for that. Like when your work is accepted somewhere and when other people are reading it, you get happy about finding new readers who are interested in what you have to say. But yeah, what's the phrase? It's a cutesy phrase. The thrill of creation, the agony of critique, I think is what I've heard, you know. So you can't please everyone. That's okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I hope you have like really weird nightmares. When I read, that's actually the most. Oh, sorry, you had a question.
What motivates you to keep writing when you write?
You know, no one's ever asked me that. I don't know. I think, I'm trying to remember who said this. Gloria Anzaldúa, who's a really famous Mexican-American writer. She said that she writes, and if I'm probably going to butcher this quote here, she said that she writes to compensate for what the real world doesn't give her. That, you know, there's just inadequacies in the world that we have, and that she wrote to sort of create other worlds, other avenues. So there's kind of like a narcissistic thing that goes on to it. I don't think it's like a bad narcissistic thing, but you know, I would agree with that, and I would side myself in that. That there are things that, you know, reality sometimes can get pretty boring, you know, and you know, not these days. The reality seems like you need to get an escape from it, but that's probably the main driving force. It's just a kind of escapist urge to go someplace else, to experience something else, to ask myself what if, you know, a kind of inner artistic drive, I think. And I was raised in a household like that, where my mother was really big on the arts, and pushing that art was kind of like an outlet for all sorts of emotional experience. So, yeah. Good. Well, again, thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, may you have nightmares from what you read or what you heard today. So, thank you.